It was so infuriating that I spent all these years going to doctors, getting all kinds of tests, all kinds of imaging, had to walk away from a business that I had spent 15 years building because I was so sick, only to find out I had to change my diet.
That even though I do practice yoga, even though I meditate, even though I did all those things, on the inside, I kind of was a wreck. And I didn't even know it until I looked at my blood samples.
It's really cool to see when you're looking at it at a cellular level, how it's affecting us.
It really was a moment where I had to sit and think about what had changed in my life and my environment that had caused incredibly healthy cells all of a sudden to be, exhibiting this heavy metal toxification. And I was like, oh, wow, this is crazy.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth. With me today is Kendell Reichhart. Kendell is an Integrative Nutrition Health Coach who's specializing in biometric screening. I have been working with her since about 2009 on my own health and really would like to share the value of having biometrics screening done on a regular basis and what that can do to help you in your health journey.
And so the idea is they're round, independent of each other. They should look like donuts. So, we can tell a lot from what our cells are doing.
So I've been on this health journey pretty much most of my life, right? But it kind of gotten a definite uptake in interest when I decided to become a holistic coach. And that was in the early 2000s. And so at that time, I started using my own self as my own little guinea pig, as it were, to experiment with how I felt things were working. And actually, at that time, I really wasn't a really big fan of taking supplements. In fact, I had gotten to this point where I thought that you should get all your nutrients that you need from your food. And in a strange way, that's how I was raised. But then as I learned more about how the earth itself is depleted, and it doesn't really have, or didn't really have, the nutrients that it needed to even feed the plants or the animals that I was eating. So then, I started taking an interest in maybe I should be looking at nutrient supplementation. So we met in 2008, even though I knew about you because of the class. I knew you were in the class behind me. I started in 2006, and then your class was 2007.
Yeah.
And so I went to one of your events. Yes, it was a David Wolf event, I remember. And that's when I learned that you were doing this biometric screening and that you were taking your practice, your holistic practice in that area.
Yeah, I think I had just started right around the same time because I started doing it because it helped me with my own health issues. And that's kind of how I fell into it when I was going up to New York and taking the classes, and just found out I couldn't eat gluten and eggs, and I had had GI issues for almost 20 years at that point, like chronic, sometimes debilitating. I was in the horse business for 15 years, riding horses professionally, and had to get out because of health issues, only to find out the whole time I had food allergies that were causing all of my digestive problems. And it was so infuriating that I spent all these years going to doctors, getting all kinds of tests, all kinds of imaging, had to walk away from a business that I had spent 15 years building because I was so sick, only to find out I had to change my diet. Like, it was, you can't even wrap your mind around that sometimes. Here we are.
Part of the thing that I have trouble, well, it's not trouble anymore, it's hindsight now, but one of the things that I found amazing is that, as we know today, is how powerful what you eat really is. And what I learned through you and what we've done, through the years, is really understanding how that's showing up in our biometrics. And I know biometrics is a really big conversation now. There's so many different techniques in biometrics, but back in 2007-8, there wasn't anything really except for blood analysis, urine and saliva analysis, what you were learning, but then it wasn't even really accepted across the board in many of the states either. So it was just an interesting time.
It was. A lot of stuff was starting to come about back then.
Yeah. So it's come a long way. It's come a long way. Okay. So we met at your event in 2008. And I think you opened your office in 2009. And that's when I first started coming to you to do the screening.
Yeah.
And so I kind of established that as my baseline. I think that's when I also started transitioning to a more plant-based diet and started really, I really understood what was happening with the poultry industry and what was happening with the, meat and cows and beef industry. But it didn't really take off for me, the importance of plant-based, until I started looking into supplementation and what that meant and how that was affecting what was showing up in my own body. Because, that was also the time, 2012, 2013, when I decided to become a yoga teacher and started to really understand why a lot of people in that space were choosing, vegetarian lifestyle over omnivore's lifestyle. Although, you don't have to be a vegetarian to be a yoga teacher. That's kind of a myth. But anyway, so this was how I really, through your work, really started to understand the importance of what was showing up in my blood and what that looked like. And it created an incredible baseline for my health at a time when I, went off into entrepreneurship and quite frankly didn't have health insurance. And so staved off a lot, stayed really healthy. And it wasn't until recently, actually, 2018, 2019, when I took a job with an organization and that took me to a site that was affecting my health, and I didn't really understand it, except I was getting colds and sniffles and things that I hadn't gotten for like 10 years. And so that's when I reached out to you again, I think, and pretty sure that's when I reached out to you. And we did that screening, and quite a bit showed up. And actually, I would like to kind of share that with everybody, because it actually, again, brought back to my own memory how important it is that we screen ourselves on a really regular basis,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how much our environment, our stress levels, our diet, it's amazing how much all of that affects our health. And it's really cool to see when you're looking at it at a cellular level, how it's affecting us. And that's what fascinated me, because me being a pre-med major in college, the science thing is definitely my interest. And I ended up my senior year getting out of the pre-med field because I was so tired of going to doctors and never getting anywhere. And I told my dad, I said, unless I know I'm going to go be a surgeon, I don't want to be in the medical field. And then there's no guarantees that that's going to be the path I end up taking. So I don't know if I can risk the next 12 years of my life in medical school to find out I'm not going to be happy. And so that's when I went back to riding horses. But yeah, so the science thing for me is it's just fascinating.
Yeah, and while there's a lot to be said about anecdotal experiences that people have, being kind of a technical person myself, by nature, I more appreciate the science route too. So share with us, if you can or will. I'm willing for you to, so please share with us, some of the things that we found just looking at my own samples, because for a period there recently, and even during, this would say from 2018 to now, I got back on track to go ahead and look at what was happening in my blood, and then changing my, not just my eating regimen, getting, a little bit more focused on being plant-based, but my supplementation regimen, really changing that to come back into some kind of homeostasis that worked for me and my body. That even though I do practice yoga, even though I meditate, even though I did all those things that externally somebody could say, oh, okay, she seems calm, and she said, on the inside, I kind of was a wreck, and I didn't even know it until I looked at my blood samples.
Right.
So I think that's interesting for people to learn.
Yeah. So this is one of your pictures, and this is one that we did when you were stress-free and things were good, and yoga and eating well. And that's what we want to see, all the cells free floating, independent of each other. We don't want to see them all clumped together. We don't want to see a lot of stuff in the background. And this is the one that we look at the blood live. And I've got a big high-powered microscope. I think it's pretty cool. And we just can prick a finger and look at these things on the slide. And so that is really ideally what we want to see. Cells should look like donuts. And then we also take that blood sample, and on a different slide, we let it dry. And this is what we're looking for, how well everything's holding itself together. Should be pretty uniform in color. And, that's a good sign. If everything was falling apart and changes the colors and holes, and I'll show some examples of that, but that would just be indicating other things going on. So when you came to me and you had the other job that you were saying about, and you started getting sick a lot, we saw some other things going on, like your blood cells were more clumped. And I think you had other stressors going on in your life, correct?
Well, it was over a 2-year span. And the second thing was more of family stressors that was happening. But I think when I first came to you, actually, I know when I first came to you, it's because I was working at this facility in the Virginia Beach area that was part of a shipyard, and it was an older, World War II bunkers, things like that. And I just didn't really realize the effect that it was having on me, except that I was getting sick. I remember going on a business trip, and one of our team members showed up, and he had a cold or whatever, and I instantly caught it, and I thought, this is completely out of character. I went for 10 years basically working for myself without insurance, only doing my own therapies and in my own environment, and not once even got a sniffle. And here I now have good medical care. And I'm sick. This is just not right. So this was a situation where I came back to you, and I looked at it. Well, what's very interesting about this, it was really fortuitous, because this was 2019, which is right before 2020. So right after this, I started back on a very strict supplemental regimen, a very strict diet, and was able to boost my immune system right before 2020, which is a whole nother story.
Yeah. And so that's, I believe, these two prior slides when you came back. And so I was trying to show an example of what it looks like when people are, doing well and feeling well, and the blood looks good. These were the two examples. So this was the one where we said, everything was kind of, there's the stress, the dark in the center, the gray ring around the outside. That's where we brought up the whole potential heavy metal issue that you were probably getting from
that site.
Yeah.
I remember you asked me, it was really funny, because I remember you asked me, did you change something? He's like, are you around toxins? And I was joking. It was a really bad joke, by the way, when I said, I live in the United States, don't I? But it was a really bad joke. But anyway, just so I don't get into trouble. But but it really was a moment where I had to sit and think about what had changed in my life and my environment that had caused incredibly healthy cells all of a sudden to be, exhibiting this heavy metal toxification. And I was like, oh, wow, this is crazy. And that's when I knew that I had to move back to Maryland. I had to move back to the DC area because where I was actually living was not helping me at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's that situation happens a lot. And I'll have people come in that are working in really old buildings or things like that, where they're just getting exposure to toxins. And I've even had clients working in hair salons where they're breathing in all those chemicals all day long. And so it's very interesting how those are just the things that we do on a daily basis that we don't realize how much it is actually affecting us. And so it was interesting to see this with the gray around the outside, and then you were comparing to what your current situation was at the shipyard. So, and
yeah, I think a lot of times too, I think about, when I think about people in careers like cleaning houses, I have family members who do those types of things, and I really worry about that, the solutions that we're using. I mean, even in my own home over the years, I've gotten very, very, very sensitive about what I'm actually using to clean with. So it's so interesting, we take those things for granted, but there it was, as clear as day on the slides. And so that was like, okay, time to make a change. Gotta go back.
Yeah, another interesting one is a lot of people who are big runners or road bikers, and they're constantly breathing in tire dust and exhaust fumes and things like that when they think they're being healthy, but they're running on the streets where all the vehicles are. And so it's kind of counterproductive. And we'll see, because tire dust has heavy metals in it. So it's just so easy for us to get that into our systems. And if we're depleted, the body sees this stuff is a mineral. It's like, well, I need minerals. My body's depleted, so I'm going to absorb whatever it is, even if it's not the right kind of mineral. We have organic and inorganic minerals. And obviously the organic ones are the ones that, our body knows what to deal with. The inorganic ones, not so much.
Yeah.
So we also, this is just examples of other things that I've seen before. So the one on the left, these are not yours, but the one on the left is just somebody who had a lot of really bad GI stuff going on, where you see the holes in the middle. The next person, all that spiderwebby stuff, there's a lot of stress, possibly from the liver. They say that the little white bubbles that we see is can indicate yeast and candida in the body. And these are those holes, can indicate that somebody's just has impaction in the colon. So these are situations where you also can say, hey, you might want to go see your doctor and get a colonoscopy done and make sure everything's okay. Or so some of this stuff can also be helpful to, make sure people go and address the things that they should sooner than later. So this can be helpful to help people out of a hole that they can't figure out what's going on, or to say, hey, we might need to go see a doctor and have this addressed, or let's go get your vitamin B levels checked, go to your doctor, get some blood work done. And that's where it's also, and we can use that too. For instance, we can get functional reports done of our blood work. And so, I'll have clients, they'll go to their blood doctor. I will give them a list of what the doctor needs to actually run, because we need a certain amount of different things to run the functional report. But the functional report's kind of fun because, and this has been something I started doing about 3 years ago, because now it's going to take your blood work and it's going to view it a little bit differently. And I might have to zoom in on this a little bit. I don't know if I can or not. Oh, I can. So it's going to look for, instead of just getting your blood work back saying it's either in a good range or out of range, here it's breaking it down a little bit more and saying, hey, this is the optimal range we should be in. This is the standard ranges that we're usually given. But when it starts to fall into some of these, so it's going to have like your good, bad, and ugly, and hey, this is alarming. So we now are breaking it down a little bit more, instead of being, okay, you're either in the right ranges or you're not. Now we can say, look, you're in the right ranges, everything's good, or it's starting to get out of range, either high or low, or it's getting critically out of range. And so this is where it breaks it down a little bit more. And then it's going to take things and put them also into the proper ratios. So we might go and get a renal panel done, which checks our electrolytes, but it might not. So all of those electrolytes might be in the right ranges, but are they in the correct ratios? And that's really important to know. Magnesium's not on most standard blood work by the doctors. So we always ask that magnesium's added, because that's a big factor. And we know there's a lot of magnesium deficiencies out there. That seems to be a big thing lately. And so once you get this, once they evaluate your blood work, then it also, on this side, it will explain what it means when something's high or low and what that can be doing to the body. So it also is an educational piece, because a lot of times we get this blood work back, we have no idea what it means. Here, it gives you written details of when your values are high or low, what that actually means.
Yeah.
And
So
then-
just like full transparency. So this is actually my report. So the timeline is, I received that other report in 2019, decided that it was time for me to make some other life choices that would move me back to the Maryland area. Ended up coming back to the Maryland area, and continued on the regimen during the 2020 timeframe. And right as things are starting to settle out, we do this test again to see, what's happening. And the blood cells themselves, if I remember on the microscope, were healthy. They showed up. They're again round. They were red. They were vibrant red. It wasn't showing any metal toxicity or of that nature.
No.
It had completely corrected itself. But then we ran this functional report, and this showed up. And again, we had to say, well, what was the variant? What's happening in your life where, that's all cleared up, but now these deficiencies are showing up, even though, again, I was eating really well, mostly plant-based, definitely organic, definitely working out, not just yoga, but by then I had a Peloton, because, we were indoors all the time. So I was doing that. And so how is this happening? I'm not around people, so I'm not picking up germs. But then there was a variant. I had a family situation that I had to deal with, and it was just really stressing me out. And I didn't really realize the impact that it was having on me internally. So I found this report to be incredibly valuable. And then again, it also helped me to make sure that I was uptaking my zinc and some other things that I had fallen off on that I hadn't noticed. Definitely my vitamin D for sure.
Yeah, this was a few other examples of what showed up in the report, where it gives like the functional index of priority of what needs to be addressed, a nutritional index on this side. And so for you needed more vitamins and minerals.
interesting because, as I said before, I was eating plant-based and I was eating organic, but I still needed more vitamins and minerals.
Yeah, and that is so common because, like, you mentioned in the beginning, our soils are so depleted and they're not going around, and unless you're growing your own food and you're adding trace minerals and compost to your soil constantly, what's mass produced out there that we're buying in the grocery stores is not going to have everything we need. So it is, most people are running around pretty deficient and not even knowing it. So it's definitely but that's a global problem. I mean, that's kind of going on worldwide at this point.
So I think that's the hardest part of this whole equation, is for people to understand how what we do to the earth actually comes back to us. I just think that cycle is so interesting. And, even in my own learning here, my own education, like something simple as choosing your honey,
Yeah.
something simple as that. You would think it's simple, but it's not, because so much of it out there is compromised. It's been diluted with something else that is not pure honey. So this, to come back to where we started when we first met each other back in 2000, and people were having such a challenge in just reading labels, on what that meant. And now the challenge is more than just reading labels. The challenge is, where is your food actually being sourced from? And we don't just mean the earth itself, but what country is it being sourced from? What is that country doing to the food supply for economic reasons? It's such a big, overwhelming topic. It's mind-boggling when you start to look at it.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
Here. Okay, so what do we have here? What are we seeing on this?
So this is just one of the last parts of the functional report, where, due to the results of the functional report, it actually sends this list to me, because if it sent it to the clients, they would probably be totally overwhelmed, because sometimes there's like 15 to 20 things that's recommended. So we pick what's most important, but this is a list of the supplements that are recommended to help try and regain balance in the body due to the results of the functional report. And, and you did this well when you did the blood and the functional report, like the blood with me and the functional report, and we kind of were able to put it all together, because then I can't say one thing has all the answers. I mean, by no means is there anything out there that has all the answers. We could do, the urine, blood, saliva, and we can get a pretty good picture. This doesn't give us all the answers. This doesn't necessarily give us all the answers anyway, either. The body is so complicated, but it gives us such a good starting point to say, hey, here's just some things that we can start working on to really get the body moving back in the right direction to regain balance. So, it's a great tool just to add to the toolbox of our health, really.
Yes, I found it pretty valuable in my decision making, on all those points that we talked about in the beginning, just having confidence that what I'm choosing to supplement is the right supplement, not what someone said is the right supplement that works for them. And give me an opportunity to talk about quality of the products. So
yeah, and that's super important. Here we just had what the doctor needs to put in for the lab work, and then we can take that functional report and upload it through the diagnostic company that I use, and we usually have a report within 24 hours. So it's just fun. I have some people that just do it a couple times a year. because they just are so intrigued. Hey, let's see what's going on now. Let me see how my supplements helped. Let's redo it. And if you can't go back to the doctor 4 times a year to get blood work, then, through this company, that you can be sent to LabCorp to do it. But yeah, but that's really about it. It's just different ways that we can look at, look at our blood and how it's affecting our health, and ways that we can go about just getting back on track and keeping our health. And sometimes these are saying, hey, we need to focus on our health emotionally, because that can have a huge impact, just that alone. Like you can look at people who have a really poor diet, but they're carefree, they're happy, life is good, and their blood would look fantastic. Somebody is completely stressing out about eating healthy and micromanaging everything they do, that they're stressing themselves, and their blood could look bad, even though they're eating 100% organic diet and doing everything possible to try and stay healthy, but stressing themselves out in the meantime. And we can look at people's blood that are like that, and it could look bad just because their stress levels are so high, because they're literally obsessed on trying to stay healthy and do everything right. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's the important thing to really leave people with, I think, from my point of view and my experience, these close to 20 years now of just kind of monitoring my own biometrics and watching the industry, the vitality and longevity industry just change and blossom, and is that it's a continuous process. You've got to stay on top of it. It's not something you can just do once and take for granted. This idea of being self-aware, awareness of what's happening, and this connection, this mind-body connection is so real. That this idea of listening to your body, and I know we've said that a lot over the decades, but it's true. And this is just another really great way to listen to your body. Seriously.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, and sometimes if people aren't totally on board with that, and then they actually can see physically what's going on in their body and their blood, with their blood, it changes everything.
I'm just wondering too, I mean, you're in the state of Maryland, and the state of Maryland, we know, appreciates this particular way of measuring yourself, if you want to put it that way. What if somebody's from a different state? How does that work out?
So as far as the functional report, that is easy to do, because that can be done all virtually. All I need is all the right requirements of the lab work from their physician, and they can just send it over to me, and we set up a consult, we go over it, and that's easy enough. With the unfortunately, the blood part, that is not very easy to do long distance, because I need a live blood sample. The urine and saliva part, I have done it where I just ship people a little syringe, and they collect a urine sample and a saliva sample, and they freeze it and overnight ship it to me. And so that can be done. It does need to be like overnight shipping, and we need to coordinate. That way I know that I'm here to receive the package, to test the samples immediately, because most of the time, by the time they get to me, they're just about thawed out, because it needs to be shipped on ice. So that can be done. It is a little tricky to do the blood part, but then there's other people. Sometimes you can find people around the country that do this. It's far and few between, but they're there. No, I first had it done in New York, and then another guy in Arizona. So they're out there. But we can find ways to make it work. But the functional report's easy enough to do virtually. That's what I've been doing mostly, honestly, since COVID, is all these functional reports. Like it's a huge tool. It's very helpful.
That's great. And it's always a good place to start anyway, just to kind of show you what supplementation you should be considering.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a great place to start.
So, hey, I really want to thank you. I know it's been a long time that we've been talking about making this video.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that it's come together. And I think it's come together in a very nice way. And I do know that there may be people who watch this and want to know more about about this particular technique that you do in your practice. So how would you like for us to let them know how to reach you?
Well, my website is naturalvibranthealth.net. And I can be reached through that. My phone number's there, my email address. My name's Kendell Reichhart.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Hug Kira for me.
I will.
All right. Well, take care. Thanks again. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.